So the reinstated 350 Rand social relief grants will cost government a whopping 27 billion Rand. This was revealed by the Finance Minister Tito Mboweni during his presentation to Parliament. Now, the proposal for a universal basic income or basic income grants has been on the table for almost 20 years with seemingly waning enthusiasm from policymakers over time. Now, some economists believe that austerity is evident in the government's budget, but the minister denies that the government has adopted austerity measures. To discuss the consequences of an austerity budget and the feasibility of the basic income grant, we are joined by Duma Gqubule from the Center of Economic Development and Transformation. Duma, an absolute pleasure to be talking to you this morning. So, the economists and the minister are in a tug of war at the moment about whether austerity measures have been put into effect within the government. What is your view on that?
Okay, so I've read every single page in the budget review. It's a 250-page document. I've also read every single page in the estimates of national expenditure, and it's about 1,000 pages with the detailed spending plans of every government department. I can tell every South African watching here today that every single page page refers to austerity and fiscal consolidation. The Finance Minister is resorting to austerity denialism. The cuts that were announced in the budget in February were 265 billion over the next 3 years. The largest cuts were from the health budget, 50 billion rands in the middle of a pandemic. Next largest was the police, 39 billion. They are planning to retrench 18,000 police officers. The next one was social grants, 36 billion rands. That has changed now with the new SRD grant. The next one was basic education, 25 billion. Tertiary education, 25 billion. The National Defence Force, 19 billion. So every single government department had cuts in their spending, and I don't see how anybody in their right mind can resort to austerity denialism. Now, the reason why we say it's so dangerous is that during a recession or a fragile recovery, the duty of the government is to spend more money to get the country out of this situation, because by definition there's too little money circulating in the economy. That is the cause of a recession. And globally, last year in the wake of the pandemic, countries spent $16 trillion, 17% of world GDP, to get their countries recover from this crisis. And I should imagine, talking about the basic income grant, 100 countries implemented unconditional cash transfers. I was reading yesterday that Hong Kong, this morning, today, many people in Hong Kong are going to get 10,000 Rand. Every citizen above the age of 18 is going to get 10,000 Rand as part of the stimulus package that Hong Kong announced. I think it's their fifth or their sixth stimulus package. So countries resorted to unprecedented means to stimulate their economies. And the countries that are doing well this year are the ones that spent the most. I'm talking about the United States spent unprecedented amounts, 7% growth this year. The world economy is going to grow by 6%. India is going to grow by 9%. China, 8.5%. Brazil, I think 5.5%. Now, why is South Africa going to underperform compared to the world economy yet again, as has been the case for the last 10 years? Because we're not putting enough money. Our response to the crisis was completely inadequate.
Duma, but excuse me, if you are the finance minister, you're going to say, well, we can't really afford it at the moment. Even these 350s that we are going to roll out of the social distress grant are going to cost us 27 billion rand. Yes, it is. We are able to afford them in inverted commas as a result of increased revenue collection in the first quarter of last year. But ultimately, we can't afford to keep them going for a long-term basis.
Well, what I say to that is that in the budget, the document that I read in detail, there was 292 billion rand cash at the end of March. Yesterday, they released figures for revenue and expenditure for, I think, up to June. And the government has got 150 billion rand excess cash. So they could easily afford this 27 billion rands, and they're not worried about it. So I'm just saying it makes no sense when our economy is in such a dire situation for us to be not spending supporting the economy by spending more money instead of withdrawing money from the economy. So yes, the government is sitting on excess cash. There are many things they can do with this to reflate the economy.
I mean, it's very scary when you mentioned the budget cuts and you sort of went through them, and ultimately it almost seems like a hierarchy of, the services we need the most in the country, and yet those are the services facing the biggest budget cuts. You speak of one of the nations that will be getting 10,000 rand per citizen over the age of 18. South Africa's 350 rand. Now, Black Sash and 80 other organizations have at least requested that the minimum of this, if you want to call it grant, be 1,268 rand, which is the upper band of the poverty line. I mean, first of all, just put that into context for us, whether we can get there, what would need to get there, and whether you think the government will even see that as something that's feasible.
Okay, let me just first a bit of background. We're now an unviable society. We've got unprecedented levels of unemployment, 75% amongst the youth, 47.9% amongst Black Africans, 51.5% amongst Black African females, and also in the Limpopo and the Eastern Cape, unemployment rates of 50%. And we've got 10 million people going hungry in the April and May, according to a recent survey. So we have to do something extraordinary. And basically, the government has failed betrayed the dreams and promises of our liberation since 1994. And this is time for something bold. So I've done some scenarios. The 27 billion, how much extra would it have cost to deliver this basic income grant today? So let's just suppose we had implemented it today. So there are three poverty lines. It's the food poverty line of 585, the lower bound poverty line of 840, and the upper poverty line of 1268, as you're mentioning. So let's start at the bottom one. How much extra money? So you must remember, when the government spends the money into the economy, they collect money. They're not like a household. So I estimate that the net cost after all the taxes the government will get is about 50%. So the net cost of the food, at the food poverty line is 72 billion, according to my calculation. So the government could have spent an extra 45 billion on top of this SRD grant, and we would have had a basic income grant. And if you go to the next poverty line, they could have spent an extra 76 billion rands, and then we could have got the basic income grant. And if you go to the top one that you're talking about, it's 120 billion rands. Now, there was a lot of criticism of the proposals that were made by some organizations about the taxes that would be required to finance it. I did an alternative scenario that assumes no tax increases, and we just allow the deficit to increase. At the lower poverty line, it is 0.9 percentage points. So and then at the next one, it's 1.4 percentage points, and the next one is 2.4. So it's a minimal increase in the budget deficit in the context of excess cash revenues. So we might not even see that increase in the deficit if we had implemented these basic income grants. So I think really they should have used this opportunity of this commodity boom to implement this basic income grant. There is no excuse anymore. There's been a proliferation of studies as to how to finance this basic income grant. I've read about 10 of these studies, and the government can't say that they don't know what to do. Yeah.
How much of a problem is accessibility as well? The first time the social relief or social distress relief grant was put into effect, we saw the South African Post Office struggling to roll it out effectively across all the parts of the country. Even the national payment system seemed to have been a problem. How much of a hurdle is that, and will that remain to be, even if, for argument's sake, they do bump the cheese up?
There has to be a different way to deliver these grants, because those queues were quite frankly degrading the dignity of our people. And in Hong Kong, they're doing a digital vouchers to the people. In South Korea, they had, I think, 4 stimulus packages last year. They gave everybody a card in which they had to spend. By the way, these stimulus packages, there's a time limit. You must spend the money in the economy within 5 months, and if you don't spend it, the money expires. So there's so much technological, and we can engage with these countries that have been implementing them in Asia. It's part of our foreign. They can come and advise us how to do it. There's no excuse. We shouldn't be distributing this with those queues at the post office. There has to be another way.
Duma Gqubule, there has to be another way. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Very pertinent points that you make there. I really do appreciate you talking to us on Newzroom Afrika channel 405.